Hello everybody, my name is Mikkel and I have been asked to deliver a passion speech for you today. A passion speech, I take it to mean a speech about that which I am passionate for. For those of you who know me and for those of you in the class that are still getting to know me, I am very passionate about music and arts and creativity in general. But more specifically than just being passionate about arts, I would say my passion, and maybe even I would say my calling, is to see the creative voice restored back to the church. I'm going to unpack a little bit about what that means to me in this speech. But before I do that, I want to define a few terms. When I speak about creativity or I use the word creativity, I have a pretty low definition of what that means. Take that to mean that anything that you do that is innovative, that is creative, that is done in your idiom or in your style, something that is done that's uniquely to you, I would define that as something that you would do creatively. So when I discuss people being creative or artistic or creative people, I take that to mean most everybody. For instance, I just read an article the other day about a group of scientists who have developed this new technique to fight cancer. And what they've done is they've taken a disease, they've specifically taken an immune disease, and they've reprogrammed it in such a way that it is programmed to designed to attack cancer cells specifically. It's incredible what they can do. They're like little cancer terminators. But the disease that they use, the immune disease specifically, is the HIV virus. So they are using AIDS to fight cancer. Now, while what they do scientifically would not be considered an art form by any definition of the word, I consider that to be extremely creative and very exciting, and it inspires me creatively. So that's more or less what I mean when I say that term. Another great example I like to use is that of my mom. My mom is a person who is able to take any task, no matter how mundane or banal it might seem on the surface, and she can take it and do it creatively. She will make a visual or auditory or some other sensory experience that makes whatever that task is that she's doing a very, very creative one. So that's what I mean when I use those words. At one point, the church used to be at the forefront of creativity. If you were an artist, if you were a painter, a sculptor, a musician, a poet, a writer, an actor, and you were doing anything that was worthwhile, you were doing it in the church. The church was the biggest and ostensibly the only patron of the arts at the time. But at one point that changed. Sometime in the 15th century, the Catholic Church got together and decided that these things were okay to do and to use and to portray, but these things were not. Literally, they said these chords in music are God's chords, and these chords, the tritone or the major sixth, the minor sixth, are the devil's chords, and you can't use those. They're off limits anymore. And likewise, there was an immense censorship of art. The printing press was invented in 1440, and almost immediately the church went to work at being very controlling about what was distributed and what was read and what was made available to people. And so, in seemingly reactory fashion, creativity left the church. Arts left the church, and hasn't really come back since. We have the Renaissance of the 15th century that really took up where the church left off, and artists likewise said, well, if we can't do this here, we're still going to do this. We're still going to be creative. We're still going to be innovative, but we're going to do it on our own. And so the church really historically positioned itself as being an enemy of art, and that stigma has really stuck with it even today. So let's fast forward to today. Art and creativity is still very much alive. People are still making things. People are still writing things. People are still being innovative and creative, but it's not happening in the church at all. And that's, to be fair, it is happening in the church. The church still has creative expression, and it hasn't died. The flames haven't died entirely, but it seems that by and large, the best that the church can hope to accomplish in being creative is to emulate or to create an analog or a reasonable facsimile of what the world is doing. And so when you have a popular Christian band, with very few exceptions, they are a direct analog of whatever is popular or successful, financially successful in the world. Uh, and I don't think that's good enough. I think the church should be innovative. I think the church should be leading culture. That's another thing. I'm going to use the word culture a few times here in the next few seconds, and I mean that interchangeably with art, because I think that art and culture are a reciprocal relationship. It's a circular relationship that they have with one another. So the church should be leading the culture. They should be leading in creativity and art, but they're not. They're emulating. They're playing catch up. Or worse, in some instances, the church is kind of hunkering down and really trying to preserve a snapshot of a culture that just simply doesn't exist in the world anymore. And in so doing, we've made our churches into museums, because that's what a museum is. A museum is a place, it's an institution that preserves a culture. And that's not what the church is called to be. The church is called to be so much more than that. So how do we fix it? And the answer is I don't know, but that's my passion. My passion is to try and figure out how we're doing it now. My wife and I have started a creative arts group at the church that we attend, and how we're trying to accomplish this is by making art accessible to people. We're trying to erase some of the stigma that exists around being artistic or creative and making that accessible to people, just like Jesus came to earth and made heaven accessible to us. I think the church should be making artistic creation accessible to people. I always like to say that the first thing we learn about God in the Bible is that He's creative. In the beginning, God created heaven and earth. And the first thing we learn about ourselves is that we're like Him. We were made in His image. So if God is creative and we're like God, we are called, we are at our core, at our nucleus, creative beings. That's a whole other speech. We need to get people involved in the church. No one needs to tell a 5-year-old that they're an artist. They just are in their nature. When we're in kindergarten, we create freely. We draw, we make a mess. We're not afraid of what we might do or accomplish. We just do it naturally. It's instinctive. But somewhere along the line, we lose that. And I think that should be something that we should try and do, is to foster and to grow and kindle that flame, that excitement about creating. And I pray that one day there will be a day when the church becomes the place again, where people are drawn to the church, creative people are drawn to the church to create, because that's where the good stuff is. And I pray that might one day be the case, and that's my passion, is to help accomplish that. I hope that made sense to you all, and I appreciate you taking the time to listen to me, and thank you. Have a good night.